session after the Lok Sabha elections begins on the 17th of June. It will be a crucial session for the Modi government because for every government, the beginning of the term is when it's easier to push through tough legislation. Now, while this is the budget session, and all eyes, of course, will be on the first budget by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, it's also one where crucial bills like the Triple Talaq and the Aadhaar Amendment Bill will be tabled. Both have failed to pass muster with the Rajya Sabha in the past, and one has to see what happens this time round with a renewed NDA in Parliament. To speak more on this, I am joined now by Abhijit Vanare, Programming Officer with the Outreach PRS Legislative Research, Vinay Kesari, Technology Lawyer, and Sanjeev Srivastav, a political commentator, joins us on this conversation as well. Welcome to all of you. Abhijit, can you take me through what, in your view, are the bills that you're watching out from, of course, apart from the finance bill?
So I just give a broad agenda before the Parliament in the upcoming session starting from Monday. So the first thing is definitely the oath of newly elected members on the 17th and 18th, and the Speaker's election will be held on the 19th. So usually the pro tem Speaker usually is the senior most member of the House. So this time around, Mr. Virendra Kumar will be the pro tem Speaker, and he'll oversee the Speaker's election as well. On the 20th is the President's address to both the Houses of Parliament. Usually the President's address gives the broad intent of the government going forward and their policy priorities for the rest of the year. In the subsequent week after the President's address, the Parliament will debate on the motion of thanks on the President's address. And after that, the government has a few days to introduce some of its legislative agenda as well. As of now, there are 10 ordinances in place, which includes an ordinance related to the Triple Talaq and an ordinance related to the Aadhaar as well. So these ordinances you're likely to see tabled in the Parliament. Apart from that, there are a few legislations as well which were a priority in the previous tenure as well. After that comes the budget to be presented on the 5th of July, and after the budget is presented, there will be a general discussion on budget, and subsequently there will be a discussion on the major ministries, which is usually referred as demand for grants. So there will be a discussion on some of the demand for grants,
right,
and eventually the budget will be passed.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for laying that out for us, Abhijit. I must tell you, the PRS is one body that tracks the workings of Parliament very, very closely. So they're the best inputs really on that. But Abhijit, what do you think will be the contentious ones? The way I see it, the Triple Talaq bill will face some contention, and so will the Aadhaar Amendment Bill. Will you tell us why there has been so much strife over the Aadhaar Amendment Bill?
Right. So just to give a quick background of what has happened on the Aadhaar ordinance, which you're likely to see as a legislation, is that initially the Supreme Court was looking at the validity of having privacy as a fundamental right, which it upheld, and in light of this, it was scrutinizing about the constitutional validity of Aadhaar. Now, in this particular judgment, the Supreme Court has struck down a few provisions, and the most often discussed in this is the section 57, which is related to the use of Aadhaar identity by private entities as well. What this ordinance is basically doing is bringing the Aadhaar law in consonance with the Supreme Court judgment. So all the things which the Supreme Court has observed, this Aadhaar ordinance is trying to bring that in line. So things like making offline Aadhaar verification without giving biometrics. Another important thing, apart from preventing use of Aadhaar for private entities, is also the provision to complain. Earlier, only the Aadhaar or UIDA authority could complain about misuse on behalf of a citizen or any individual. Now this ordinance also has a provision where any citizen individual who has an Aadhaar card can complain for any fraudulent or misuse of his Aadhaar card. So the ordinance has some of these broad provisions and also the associated penalties for violating these provisions.
Okay, let me bring in Vinay Kesari here. Vinay, there is a very vocal group of anti-Aadhaar activists who've had issues with this bill. Some now say that it is in contravention of the Supreme Court order on Aadhaar, which pretty much did away with any private use of Aadhaar. The bill, of course, says it's voluntary. What are the key contentions that we're going to see?
There are a couple of things to consider here.
Yeah.
Firstly, one of the reasons that the Supreme Court, in my view, held the way it did, is that as most people know, the original Aadhaar Act was passed as a money bill, and money bills are meant to pertain only to matters concerning the Consolidated Fund of India. And that, in my view, is one of the reasons why private sector use of Aadhaar was struck down. Now, it seems fairly clear that the legislative roadmap that the government wants to use for the Aadhaar amendment bills is not that of a money bill. They want to take it to both houses of parliament, and it will not be passed as a money bill. That, arguably will give it legitimacy to allow private parties to have access to the Aadhaar infrastructure in case of voluntary use. Now, the points of contention are many. There are still uncertainties about whether it is possible to, amend a money bill in this fashion. Can a non-money bill, override the overall intent of the original bill and so on? But I think what's important to note is that here, there is one, it is predicated on the fact that this is only for voluntary use. Right? It does not pertain to any sort of situation where that can be made mandatory. It is only in a situation where someone is voluntarily agreeing to use their Aadhaar. And it makes certain that in all such cases, you have another alternative. Nobody can be forced to use only Aadhaar for authentication or for KYC by a private party. And also they have laid out a very clear set of sort of certifying criteria to make sure that any private entity that is allowed access to eKYC, the eKYC facility, goes through a fairly what appears to be a fairly rigorous process where they need to meet certain criteria before they're allowed access to this eKYC infrastructure.
So do you think, Vinay, do you think that there is no real room for contention with this version of the bill, because it's this very version of the bill which was held up the last time round?
So, well, it was held up in the sense that it was not defeated. It was held up, and also you have to take into account the environment. We were just about to go into an election. There were obviously other issues dominating the agenda. It's of things that probably are quite different this time around. So I think that is definitely one factor we have to keep in mind. The second is that, look, of course, there will be people who will oppose the bill on certain grounds. I'm not going to say that there will be no contention. There will definitely be some contention. I'm fairly certain that even if this bill is passed, it will eventually be challenged in court. So I think we have to make sure that we're careful in the way we look at all of this. The second thing to keep in mind is that from the industry's perspective, after eKYC was withdrawn for private parties, the ecosystem has also adapted a little bit. They have tried to find other ways to to make it possible for people to seamlessly onboard onto apps and services that require quick KYC. So I think all of this also kind of indicates that over time we need many options. eKYC is one option, other eKYC. Perhaps the ecosystem also needs multiple options of this kind.
Okay. You spoke about the political environment, and that's a key point. And Sanjeev, let me bring you in here. Before the elections, of course, in the last parliament session, and before that as well, the triple Talaq bill and the Aadhaar amendment bill were up for heated debates and a lot of contention from the opposition. Now the opposition finds itself tamed and has been licking its wounds for the last month, a little short of a month. Do you think that they will put up a fight in the parliament session?
I think they will. And the government, I think, it has two options. It can either steamroll its way through, flush on the back of a massive election win, and also realizing that the opposition is weak, but they still don't have the numbers in Rajya Sabha. I think this session would be not so much about triple talaq and the Aadhars, and yes, they are very important issues. But remember, politics is behind us for the time being. Elections are over. So somewhere also the government would also want to send out some different kind of signals. At least I hope that through this session. So politics should not be much on their agenda. Welfare measures and populist schemes will also not be much on their agenda, because immediately after assuming charge, the Prime Minister, his first decision was transferring money and sanctioning more money for poor farmers, and also a scholarship scheme for the daughters of martyrs. So I think this session, the government realizes, I hope, and I am sure they do, that the economy is tottering. We are in a serious crisis, and this session has to be devoted, like you mentioned in your introduction, Tamanna, that labour reforms may be one of the issues which may be on their agenda. This session has to be used by the government, because the first couple of sessions are the ideal honeymoon period wherein government can really bite the bullet and take some tough decisions to send a right message across, not across the country but across the international community. This is the time that they have to bite the bullet and revive that much talked about phrase.
Sanjeev, let me remind you,
get the animal spirit going in the country.
Let me remind you. Let's rewind. Yes. Let's rewind 5 years, and the land acquisition bill was it was attempted to be pushed in one of the first few sessions after the 2014 victory, and that's the first time the opposition and the Congress really tasted blood by managing to beat back the attempts to amend land acquisition rules in India. And that kind of changed policy making for the next few years.
You're right, Tamanna. Yeah. But by saying that, by giving that example, you are trying to say, without perhaps realizing it, that the government hasn't learnt its political lessons in the last 5 years. So this time they know. That time the fear was that immediately after election they should not be seen as a suit boot ki sarkar or as a pro-capitalist sarkar. Right now they have come back quite decisively and with a thumping majority, positioning themselves as a garibon ki sarkar, as a sarkar of the have-nots. But Prime Minister and his team fully realizes that even to do better for the have-nots and for the more welfare measures that you want to introduce, you need to get the economy going. So this time, vis-a-vis 2014, I think they are on a much stronger and sounder footing if they really want to press ahead, like you said, to press the pedal on reforms. Or, decisions which may not be immediately popular, but much needed for the country.
Let's look at the labour code then. Let me bring in Abhijit here. Then the labour code is the key one in that context to watch out for, because labour laws in India notoriously archaic and difficult to reform. It's still not clear what kind of a bill will come across. What are your bets? What are you guessing that the government will be able to push?
Right. So there have been some discussions on the labour code, compiling the labour code laws and consolidating as well. So this could you could possibly say that it's in line with one of the policy priorities, which was on the ease of doing business. But apart from that, there are some other issues that have been discussed as well. Say for example, the new education policy, which could also have future implications on the jobs as well. So this new education policy could also be one of the things discussed. Jobs also has been one of the things that has been because of the report and a few other data in public domain. So those are there. But apart from that, there are a few other important legislation I just wanted to point out have lapsed in the previous Lok Sabha because they could not be passed in the Rajya Sabha. But they also indicate the government's intent, to pass or probably reintroduce some of those. And these have all have large repercussions on the entire country. So some of these include the motor vehicles bill, which changes some of the motor vehicle related rules in India. Then there is the transgenders bill, which gives more rights to equal rights to transgender in various avenues. Then there is the surrogacy bill as well. And of course, there is a consumer protection bill as well, which again makes a huge difference in the way the buyers are treated and their grievances are redressed in the country.
Absolutely. Thank you, Abhijit, and we hope to have you back once the session is underway to look at some of those bills more closely. I want to thank all of you for joining the debate. Of course, the big one this session will be the budget. The first budget will be a mission statement of sorts for the Modi government, and we'll have an eye on that. So thank you all of that to all of you for that. But before we go, just to bring your attention to a very crucial story. Do you remember the Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal's announcement to offer free rides for women in the metros? It was looked at as a political move and pushed back as well. But now the definitive voice on the issue has spoken out. Metro man E. Sridharan has written to the Prime Minister and has called it a move that will bankrupt the Delhi Metro. He's urged the central government, which is a stakeholder in the Delhi Metro, to not let it go ahead. He's saying it's not the right decision at all, and the Delhi government's promise to reimburse losses is poor solace. That definitely puts that entire debate in a different perspective. With that, we'll take your leave on the India development debate, and thank you all for watching. Stay tuned to ET Now.